Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blue Mondays, the GLORIO Blogs podcast about being honest about your feelings. Being honest with me today, as always, are my compatriots Aqua Guys. Hello, Aqua. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling in my 30s, just like the show. I am entering my 30s, and I'm coming to terms with all of the mistakes I have made in my youth, and I am growing as a person.
We are probably older than everybody in this show, honestly. And returning after a brief sabbatical, there is also G. How are you doing, G?
Hey, I'm so glad to be back, Awesome that I get to be back here for this boring episode where all they do is talk, and I wasn't here for the cool episode where we got the shiny new robot.
It wasn't that shiny. It honestly wasn't.
No. Spec 2 is okay. My brief hot take on Nervash Type 0 Spec 2 is...
It's profoundly mid.
Yeah, it's kind of a boring mid-season upgrade. Like, I had to literally pull up pictures because, I mean, I know like the shoulders are different, but I had to actually pull up a side-by-side to be like, oh yeah, I guess the fin on its knee looks different.
Yeah, it has a Wave Rider mode now.
Yeah,
which it doesn't need because it can fly in robot mode. So what are we even doing here?
I know, it's a little... Because I mean, once you, whatever, mechs or whatever, right? But it's like once you introduce a plane mode in a world where everybody flies with a surfboard, once you introduce a plane mode, you have to then start. It doesn't matter in mecha, but once you introduce it, you make people start asking the question: wait, why don't we just make our mechs look like planes?
Yeah, I mean, like Gundam at least has a fairly good explanation for that, but all other mech shows, you begin to question the fundamental assumption of them, which is why are we building big robots? And the answer is because it's cool. But,
because it's cool. The other thing is you guys didn't mention it in the last episode, but shout-outs, they also, they played the first OP during that cool sequence, which
I'm
did. Always a big fan of.
That. Yes.
Which is actually why that's actually that moment is low-key one of my favorite scenes from this kind of stretch of the show. But anyways,
we did forget.
No, I'm here to talk about feelings now, I guess.
Yes. We are all going to sit down and have a therapy session about how old and useless we are and how we're going to die soon.
And how we need to leave the legacy. We need to leave, the responsibilities. Hand the responsibility of taking care of our planet to the next generation.
Yeah, the next generation who's 6 or 7 years younger than us.
Yes.
The Gurren Lagann problem, as I like to point it out there. This week, we are going to be covering episode 33, Pacific State, and episode 34, Inner Flight, and a very emotional, very character-focused pair of episodes, as we've been alluding to. There's some big revelations here. There's a few more flashbacks. There's lots and lots of good, juicy stuff to be getting into. So let's kick it off with episode 33, Pacific State. Aqua, any guesses on the musical reference for this one?
I mean, I got the feeling this was an important one because they actually drop it in, they name drop it in the show.
Yeah.
But I had no idea. I looked it up and I was like, I don't know this song, but it seems to be a pretty big song in the niche micro genre that Eureka 7 usually refers to.
Well, this one a little bit less niche, let's say. So this song is called Pacific State. It is a song by the band 808 State. Is band the right word? Musical group, let's say, 808 State.
I mean, in electronic music, they generally refer to it as a project.
Sure. Okay, a project then, but this project formed in Manchester in 1987, so just in time to catch the sort of vanguard of the UK house and dance scenes there. They're named after, of course, the famous Roland drum machine, the TRS 808. And this song, Pacific State, is it's described as a mini album, which is to say it's only 6 songs long, but it was released on 12-inch vinyl. The album Quadra State, released in 1988. This song is famous. This song was a number 10 hit on the All Formats chart.
Oh, wow.
So in the UK, that's worth pointing out. I don't know if it charted in the States. I don't think so. But It's fairly famous. It's one of the very first or very early examples of acid house, which, and the fact that a song like this, which it's not completely unmainstream, but it is fairly club oriented, indicates you just how big the dance and house scene was at the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s in the UK. Fun fact, this song contains a sample of a loon, a type of bird. That sample was later used on Lady Gaga's song Babylon.
All right. Sure.
So one of those weird little connections to a more modern world of music. But yes, but by the standards of a lot of the tracks we have covered, this was a fairly mainstream hit.
I mean, I'm assuming also the fact that it came from Manchester in that time period, it was fairly influential in the whole like Manchester baggy acid house rock fusion thing that would give us Primal Scream.
Yeah,
so
88. 88 is the very beginning of like the acid house scene. Like I said, 808 State were considered quite a formative band of that genre. So this song is well known by those standards, and by the standards of most of the songs we have covered, this is a pretty mainstream song here. It's a particular favourite of Dai Sato, I believe, which is why this pivotal episode uses it as a title. And you can tell this is an important episode because we have no open.
Yeah.
Cold open.
Yeah.
Not rather surprising, right? Especially for a show, like, usually you associate a lack of a cold open with, like, a big action set piece.
I mean, when you say a lack of a cold open, do you mean a cold open? Because
what we're
getting is the cold open.
Yeah, a lack of opening credits. Yeah.
We kind of get a flashback of, well, not even a flashback, an alternate, glimpse into an alternate world, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah. We learn a little bit about Earth that was 10,000 years ago, before the Promised Land, and we get to see our main cast and some familiar faces in a slightly different role, don't we?
It's kind of a neat sequence, It's almost like a what's that like common like it's like coffee shop AU or whatever, right? It's like it's Hawaii AU basically,
yes.
Right?
Gold Coast AU.
Yeah,
but yes, we see Earth that was. We see people actually surfing.
Yes,
and we see projections, images of Holland and Talho, of Charles and Rai, and of Renton and Eureka. I'm not sure whether the surfer we follow is meant to be Mathieu, but with an even bigger fro. I don't think it is. I think it's just.
I think it's a different character.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. Like this is. I mean, this is a mood piece, and it's an interesting choice to open the episode on something like this, to set mood, to set tone.
It very much does a good job, I think, of communicating, like, we've talked, I think before plenty of times on this podcast about Eureka 7's like thematic and cultural inspirations, right? That sort of like early 2000s, vaguely, like optimistic environmentalist end of history sort of like, free love kind of vibe, right? And
kind of a techno hippie movement.
Yeah. And I think just having actual surfing as we know it here on Earth is like, I mean, it's a fun and effective segment. It is also sort of like a brick to the face of like, hey, this is like what Eureka 7 is about.
Yeah, it's a little on the nose, I would say. To me, the most interesting part about it is that it's perhaps the most explicit connection we have had to the former Earth that we have seen at this point, right?
I mean, I think it's also the fact that they use our main characters, or like characters who resemble our main characters, sort of like hits home the message of like the cyclical nature of history, or something like, people like this will have existed 10,000 years ago as well, or it could be like, what would we be like if certain events in history had not taken place. I think it raises like interesting questions, not necessarily from the like, what does it mean? Is this an alternate reality? Were there like identical ancestors that our main characters had? But more like okay, sure, like what is this trying to represent? Is this like a what could have been? Is this like a this is like a metaphorical allegory for what the show is about? Is it just we were too lazy to design new characters for this little flashback?
I suspect there might be a little bit of all of those columns in there,
Right.
but I think the most important thing is that it's trying to thematically link the very abstract things we are seeing from a science fiction story back to sort of this ethos, this sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, like mentality, this surfer mindset, this hippie creed, whatever you want to describe it as, But like I said, I think it's a tone piece more than anything else.
Yeah,
because it's interesting, right? Because G, you mentioned, and I think I agree with that. Like you mentioned the whole like end of history, like this is the ideal world, But on the other hand, it is weird how Eureka 7 on one hand has that quote unquote naive idea of like a vaguely like liberal coded environmentalist like sort of idealism, while on the other hand also, I've mentioned this before, very much being like a post 9/11 kind of paranoia, like there is actually no end of history, there is like cycles of conflict here and there. And it's interesting to see how the show tries to like unite these two things in general, like how it can be both very idealistic about its ideas of like counterculture and rebellion and being a surfer hippie fighting for freedom, generic like quotation marks freedom, while on the other hand also being often like rather cynical and confronting you with the fact that the world is a complicated and cruel place, right?
I think I should butt in here just briefly to anybody who is listening who has not heard of the concept, the end of history, before. I should explain it does not mean a literal end to human history, but the concept of the end of history is the idea that, eventually humanity will evolve into the perfect form of its society, which then there will be no more conflict. The idea has been bandied about by tons of authors down the years, Hegel in particular, but generally when people use the phrase the end of history, they're referring to a 1992 book by Francis Fukuyama called The End of History and the Last Man. So just to give you some idea, when we are talking about quote unquote the end of history, we are not talking about a literal apocalypse. We are talking about sort of the evolution of mankind into the perfect society.
And also like the idea being like, especially in the 90s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, there was this idea that we may be approaching the end of history or be in the end of history, that there would be no more major global conflicts, and that like the American hegemony, the Western democratic liberal hegemony had conquered over, conquered everything else, and that would be how humanity would like live for the rest of its life.
Yeah, one world order.
Right. And the idea then being that, of course, 9/11 ruined that idea or destroyed that illusion.
I mean, yes, it always was an illusion,
Right.
Right. That to be clear.
Yes. Yeah. Of course.
Fukuyama's book was criticized by prominent historians pretty much from the moment it appeared.
Right.
But yes, Eureka 7, does. I'm not going to say it embodies that hopeful naivete. I think the show is sensible about being optimistic, but at the same time, it's quite effective at exposing sort of the dark underbelly of society.
Right. I do want to be clear. Obviously, I think that I think those are influences on Eureka 7, and that's why when I speak of like this surfing sequence as sort of being like a very like in your face like re-emphasis of that. I do think obviously Eureka 7, the show itself, is, and as we will see with these two episodes, remarkably clear-eyed about like the falsehood of maybe that sentiment in a lot of ways, right? Like, these two episodes are literally about Holland like coming to terms with the reality of like the geopolitical events and ideologies that like defined his youth, and like the things he experiences that changes his his beliefs, his ideology, his life mission. And so I think this is a show that's actually very clear-eyed about like the reality that like conflict and human suffering, will always be pervasive aspects of the human condition.
Yeah, and sort of to put a bow on this discussion of the opening, I think what this opening is it's aspirational, right? In that sense, the comparison to a coffee shop AU is not entirely off base. Like the idea is, in an ideal world, in a dream world, we would be the surfer's creed would be something espoused by all mankind. Our friend, our characters could spend all day, surfing and communing with nature and all of that kind of stuff. This is a dream. It's an aspirational dream. It's sort of a nostalgic dream, right? The idea that, because obviously we know in the real world, it was never like this, but and I think it's interesting that they choose to emphasize the history aspect here. This is the first time we've gotten a sort of even a ballpark figure on how far in the future we are, really. And this is sort of kind of like a story faded to legend, faded to myth thing, a dream of a better world that has persisted down the ages. And I think that's the context in which this opening is meant to be seen.
Man, right? It is crazy to think 10,000 years later and a different planet, and the Japanese yen still endures.
That's just the power of the economy, baby.
But in all seriousness, I think this all actually is a very good jump point for. I think describing it as aspirational is perfect, right? Because what is the scene that immediately follows this is the very hard, cold look at the reality of the aftermath of oh god, what's the name of the city?
Gremikoa.
Yeah, right. It's Holland with his head in his hands, right? Like
it's Eureka not being able to look at Renton. It is sort of a as you say, a very hard contrast between the two, and I think we do start with our team, almost all of our team, on a very dark note, right? Like, we're used to seeing Eureka distressed. Most of the last episode was dedicated to her being distressed as well, but it's rare. We have not seen much of Holland being openly sort of grieving like this.
I mean, this seems to be the actual, or at least one of the first times when he actually cares, right? When it is obvious that he is doing this not necessarily out of a selfish desire to stick it to the man, but because he has genuine empathy for the people who are fallen victim to all of the cruelty that the Federation and Dewey are inflicting.
I mean, let's say it's the first time that he has allowed it to show.
Right.
And, this episode is... A lot of this episode is about Holland coming to terms with his new place in this new world, really. And I think by having him show vulnerability so early, they signal that this will be an episode where he is more emotionally available to the audience. But yeah, it's a bad scene, Gremikoa has been wiped out. Kengo is having to act as team dad because Holland is so depressed. Hap has been searching for info about the mysterious Master Norb, but it's all coming up fake. And Eureka is in another funk again. And Renton is unsure of what to do, which means so he decides to go to Dr. Bear for advice.
Well,
a man with a clear grasp on reality.
Yes, definitely. Having said that, I think this scene's really good.
It is.
I mean,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that. So, firstly, we see a rare deployment in Eureka 7 of the fewer frames are funnier mantra here, where he tries to take the sweet.
Yeah.
But yes.
Also, it's a very brief scene, but I think it communicates a lot about Dr. Bear and a lot about Renton and a lot about their situation in very few words, really. I think that they do a really good job of sort of establishing what the sort of romantic through line in this episode is going to be, right?
Yeah, it's a good bit, right? Where yes, it's I think there's multiple cases in this episode, right? Of like, in an ideal world, this is the role of your elders, your seniors, right? Is like of or just more experienced people in your life, right? It's despite the fact that Holland is a leader, Kengo is older, right? He can be a little bit more clear-eyed about it, right?
And in fact, as we find out later on, Kengo is the only other person who has been there with Holland and Talho all the way from
right. One of the OG,
the OG. Yeah.
But yeah, like same with Dr. Baird or Renton, right? Like again, though of course it's very funny that like Renton is getting relationship advice from a divorced man, but it's
I mean, look, it happens to the best of us, okay? Like,
but the advice is good though, right? Like it's a lovely bit of advice, right? Because I think Renton's not even like, I don't think he's even necessarily wrong when he thinks that, oh, what Eureka needs right now is distance, right? Oh, she needs time to sort out her feelings, right?
I mean, he's sort of overcompensating for his previous mistakes.
Exactly, right? But like, this is where kind of, Dr. Bear gives the good advice that like a good relationship is, there is a pursuit. Like, this is your partner. Like, go after her. Like talk to her, right? Like, you are, like, there is nobody more qualified on this ship to be with her in this moment than you, right? And yeah, it's a very solid bit, and obviously uses the candy as the like, you see, like
it's the way to start talking, right? That's what he says.
Exactly.
He says you need a reason to start talking. And I think Renton's sort of immediate response is very relatable. He's like, Dr. Bear shows him the candy and says, you need a reason to start talking. And Renton says, okay, well, I'll use that reason then. And then Dr. Bear, pulls it away from him and says, no, this is my thing. You need your thing. And that's funny in the moment, but it's also true. Dr. Bear doesn't really know Eureka. He knows her a bit, but he doesn't know her like Renton does, and Renton needs to find the way to get through to her because only he can do that. That's a good lesson.
Right. But of course, this being a like episodic show, it will take him the entire episode to find out what that is, and in the meantime he will like goofily try to read women's magazines like
yes,
that is what is a good funny conversation starter to talk to a woman.
That's pretty good.
Look, man, at least he's looking at magazines, thank God, he was a teenager before like, Reddit and social media existed. Could you imagine if he was like on fucking Reddit being like, how to create good moment with woman?
How to break the ice. No, Renton would never take horror. Yeah, Renton would never take advice from these guys. He only takes advice from like soft boy wife guys, which is why his only romantic advisors are Dr. Bear and Doggy.
No, I guess he never got romantic advice from Charles. I guess he only got generalized life advice from Charles.
But Charles is also a massive wife guy. So.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was getting at.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, as we kind of find out with this episode, I mean, even Holland, right? Like all of these dudes, low key.
I mean, of course, Holland is a wife guy. That's the only reason why Talho is with him.
Speaking of Holland and Talho, we do kind of set up our parallel plot arc here, which is Talho looking at some previous pictures of her and Holland together when they were younger, which is hilarious because we later learn in this episode that they've only known each other for like maybe 4 or 5 years tops, so they can't be that much younger. But
also when you're in your 20s, like,
I guess
you change a lot in a couple of years,
I guess,
right?
Yeah.
And the most important picture, in this album is of a younger Holland and Talho riding a ref board together, right?
Yes.
You could tell Holland was younger because he didn't have his soul patch yet.
Yes. It's kind of shocking how much younger it does make him look, actually.
It does.
He looks extremely baby-faced without the soul patch there. But I really enjoyed Talho saying, we're so young, it makes me sick. That is a very, very relatable line, quite frankly.
What I do like is like, because it seemed like after episode 30, Talho just like flicked the switch and was like, okay, I am the mature and responsible one, and everything that comes out of my mouth will be like patient and sage advice for the stupid man children around me. And this scene like shows that she still has her vulnerability, still has her like not her bratty side, but like a more melancholy side to her, that she didn't just immediately become the person who is always 100% on top of things, in charge of things, that she can still have her little moments of being the Talho we know.
I mean, it's very in character for Talho to put on the appearance of hypercompetence and have some doubts behind it, and I think it's another mark of the maturity of the writing, in that, when Talho abandoned her G-endorsed look and went into her trad cath era, that clearly was a major life change, but people do not automatically snap into a new mode 100% immediately.
Right.
She began changing, but she's still struggling with some of the things she struggled with before, right?
And that's that's a thing the show generally does well, right? We saw it with Renton, who has also had like a moment when he decides, I'm not going to be the boy I used to be, I'm going to become the man I want to be. But he will still occasionally have those moments where he's still the boy. And we get the same thing with Holland kind of as well, right? The man needs to be dragged kicking and screaming into maturity, and he will still have like his mopey moments. But they show that character development is not a like, oh, you reached that climax, and then post climax you are an entirely different person, like flicking a switch. They show that it's something way more organic and natural, and that people contain multitudes,
right? And we get other bits of old Talho in this episode. The bit where she joins Renton and laughs at him reading all the magazines and stuff is very cute, and like that's a good example of the sort of like slightly. The tease is still there, but it's a much gentler, more affectionate version than the version we saw way back at the beginning. Of the show.
I mean, the Talho in the first 10 episodes of this show that sees Renton doing the same thing uses this to blackmail him for an episode of hijinks.
Yes.
Whereas here, she still laughs because it is funny how misguided Renton is, but because she knows how genuine he is trying his best. He's not very good at it, but he is trying his best. Yeah. And I think she is receptive to that, right? And so we get the Talho here that gives a very good, kind of the supplementary piece of advice to Dr. Bear's advice, which is it's not the item, it's the memory created around it, right?
Yeah, the moment.
I mean, where's the lie? She just likes her men pathetic.
God. I mean, joking aside, though, it is an interesting, we do get actually in this episode, there are quite a few callbacks to earlier episodes, particularly the presence of the John Henry silver jewelry from episode 5.
Right, the ring, yeah.
Right, the crushed ring that she was wearing around her neck. But it is just a demonstration of not just Talho, but also a Gecko State crew as a whole, who are better adjusted to their position as the adults to Renton and Eureka's children, right? They are more supportive. They are more emotional. They are more available. They have grown into not necessarily fully responsible adults yet, but they're getting there.
Right. And it's one of the main themes of the show that has come full circle, right? We've talked a lot about how the show is not just about growing up, but also about the responsibility you have towards people younger than you, people who look up to you, to be a beacon, or at least try to set a good example. And I think the arcs of many of the adult characters have been about this, right? Talho, Holland, and even some of the more minor or bitty Gecko State characters have sort of grown into, as you said, that role that is expected for them, because if the world is in such a state that society as a whole cannot be expected to raise these children into the people they are meant to be, so it's up to those who still have good in their hearts to do it, even though it may be difficult. They might not want to do it. They may need to do some soul searching themselves.
Yeah.
And I think the show has done a very good job at portraying that.
Yeah, and I think we see that most prominently in the Holland arc in this episode, where he goes from depressed and doubtful to self-loathing to ultimately through to a kind of peace at the end of it. I mean, one reason I particularly wanted to have you on this episode is we've spoken in the past about how teenage you never forgave Holland. I think this episode is like a major sort of come to Jesus moment for Holland, really, this one and the next one. What was your perception of him like after these episodes there?
I think, as I kind of suspected, now that I am older, I have more sympathy for like Holland, and especially like these two episodes where I think broadly they do earn Holland's like redemption is maybe not the right, is too far, but like because it's not like he was a monster, but like
he's getting started, let's say.
Yeah, and I think this combined with some stuff that I am now remembering happens later is like, I guess my take on Holland and his development is like, he does the things that like an adult should do when he has realized he has done wrong by people, right? He is, like he earns his growth in these episodes. He does take a hard self-examination of like who he has been. He does give a very straightforward, if brief, apology to Eureka and
it's matter of fact, let's say.
Yes. which is at least an acknowledgement that he has done wrong by these two, in the past. I think he should have at least, verbally said, "Hey, sorry for like beating you up, a kid like half my age, like or more." Should have at least acknowledged that that's really not a cool thing to do.
Yeah,
but
I mean, they do have bigger fish to fry at the moment.
Yes, and I guess the thing I would say of Holland is like he is still a person that I think I don't know, like do I forgive him? I'm not necessarily, but I do think that these episodes and things that I am now recalling about him later, well, at least tell me that he puts it on the line,
I mean, I think one of the most interesting things about this episode is that it's fairly explicitly stated that he does not expect to survive this.
Right,
ordeal.
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Like, in a certain sense, he's a death seeker.
Yeah, and I think that's also why it's important for the sort of reveal in the second episode of these two, which we'll get to later, right? But that it is so like it is so look, we are all modern, educated men with modern progressive sensibilities, but also who amongst us doesn't deep down like glorify and worship
by an evil woman?
No, I mean that too, but no. Who amongst us is not obsessed with the idea of a good death? Right? Like is that not in some ways deep down subconsciously one of the most masculine desires is to die a good death? And that I feel like that is sort of what Holland is going through in this episode, where he's like, yeah, this will be my last ride.
I mean, it is it is a very adolescent approach to the concept, so to speak, and I think that you see that coming through in this scene, which I think is just terrific. Where he does keep falling off the board, and eventually he admits it. He says, "I'm pathetic," and then he is, I think, perhaps for the first time in this show, truly honest, truly emotionally vulnerable to us,
right?
And and I think it's interesting that this speech is not it's not a direct speech about him, or it's not a direct speech about Talho, and you can take that how you want, but it is a speech about how he loves this planet, about how he loves riding the waves, and again we see that sort of theme of love for the world, harmony with nature. Coming through, and that is, I think it's very interesting that is the moment that they choose to make Holland sort of break out of his shell once and for all, is to admit that he loves the world, that the world is beautiful.
Yeah, it is a really great moment in what is like a really great episode where, in some ways, it almost reminds me of, as someone who is currently making their way through Twin Peaks, where Albert Rosenthal reveals that like he is a man filled with nothing but love and compassion for the world, despite being the most acerbic individual in that show.
Despite being a huge jackass.
Yes, and it's a similar vibe, right? Of like, despite all the bluster, like that, like Holland is a romantic at heart, right? Like,
because in some senses he is a child at heart. He still has a very childish perception of masculinity and heroism and all of these things.
I mean, the idea that he is willing to fight and die because he loves a world that would give him the things he loves in his life, right? Like whether that's Talho or boarding or whatever, right? It's the idea that his conclusion about the universe is that a world that would give me such good things is a world worth fighting and dying for, is like it is romantic in the classical sense, right? It is this man is so full of the biggest, weepiest emotions. But he wraps it all up in the most fucking like scruffy counterculture, like persona, right?
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, it's been a big discussion with the new Superman movie out, but that is what punk is. It is putting on this edgy facade, hiding a deep, like almost naive idealism. That you just love other people, that you want to be kind, that you want good things to happen to everyone, right?
And this is why I think it is so important that Holland is such an abrasive character early on in the show, because it shows how hidden this side of him is. It shows how much armor he has put around himself because of the things that have happened. And again, we see some more of this in the next episode, but it would not be nearly as satisfying to see this moment if we had not spent so many episodes talking about how much of a total shitter he is.
I mean, just imagine if anyone, especially these kids, found out that he was cringe.
Yes, right. He is not cringe, he is free.
Yeah.
And you know who else is free? Renton and Eureka for a moment, because in what I am going to call, for me at least, the signature scene of the entire show,
right?
Yes,
we see them riding past on the longboard, and it is just an impossibly beautiful moment. It is such a special moment. Whenever anybody says to me Eureka 7, I think of this moment. This is the image.
Yes.
I mean, this is an iconic shot from the show, right? This is like what you get when you load up the show in Plex. This is the picture for Eureka 7.
And it's so beautiful, but and it's so interesting because Zigg, I am the same, right? Like, my cultural memory of Eureka 7 is this moment, this wonderful, tender moment where Renton and Eureka are riding the board together, and there's no dialogue, but you infer that like this is a moment in which they are able to forget their hardships. They are
so happy. They are so excited,
free, as we say.
Yeah, and just Talho's comment, I hope that this is a good memory for the two of them. It's such an effective tying together of the Talho and Holland stuff to the Renton and Eureka stuff, to show that both of these couples are humans who have struggled and who have faced hardship, but they love each other, and there is such a powerful sense of connection there.
It's about family, man.
Yeah.
It's also funny because, again, what I was getting at is, in my mind, it was such a bigger scene, but it's actually... It's
almost
brief.
Throwaway. Like, it's almost like, hey, look what Renton and Eureka are doing over there. Like,
and I think it's funny because it's almost like it's sort of like diegetically in universe. Though the reason it becomes special is because Stoner takes a picture of it, right? Like,
yes, and that becomes a plot point in later episodes, I will say. It eventually becomes a way out cover. But the thing I was going to say, G, is actually this is exactly as I remember it, because I remember it being quite brief. I remember it being because it is used as a punctuation mark on the end of this Talho and Holland scene. In a sense, this scene is not really about Renton and Eureka at all. This is just a fleeting appearance by them. But again, it is that use as a punctuation mark that connects these two couples and connects them through the shared theme that connects Renton and Eureka back to that old picture of Talho and Holland. Even the picture that Stoner takes is almost exactly the same as that old picture of Talho and Holland, right? And it's just the use of a scene with almost no dialogue, a scene which is very short, but it acts as such a powerful point of connecting the story and the emotions you're feeling. That's the thing I remember about it. That it is sort of the culmination of the emotions that everybody has been going through in this episode.
Yeah, it's a very effective moment. It is, as we say,
a beautiful artistic one as well.
Yeah.
And after that, we get some pretty major, well, theoretically, some pretty major shake-ups there, which is Holland decides he's going to disband the Gecko State because, this isn't their fight, and they've got to go and find Norb all on their own. And of course, the crew don't listen to him because, look, it's still a story, okay? We need a good getting the band back together shot. So, of course, everybody's like, nah, we're going to stick around and do some shit.
Even they realize that, like, we were never, like, a cool counterculture surfing crew, right? That was always the front. Like, and now you're asking us to believe that that is what it actually was, and now things have gotten too seriously. Because, in a way, things have gotten more seriously. Like, they're actually stepping up to what Holland wanted Gecko State to be. But they have also never really not been that, right? They have always kind of been this rebel subterfuge organization.
Right. But I guess there is a difference between, being outlaws and openly waging war against the government of this entire planet. And
they've decided to actually become rebels as opposed to rebels.
Yes. And we do have a scene earlier in the episode where the male crew members sit around and say, what are we doing here? Have we lost our sense of what we were here to do? And obviously, it's a fairly cliched thing, but it is fun to see the crew come together and back them, And I think it is a strong sort of reward for the emotional turmoil that Holland and Talho have been through in this episode, to sort of see the crew assemble behind them to reaffirm their faith in them. I think that it is sometimes the path of least resistance is the correct way to go.
I mean, I like how it shows that, like, the positive development of our main characters sort of spills over and is subconsciously influencing the people around them to also try and, be better and more responsible.
Right, and I mean, this is a show about growing up. It's a show about leadership. It's a show about setting an example, right? And just as Holland has sort of matured to meet the moment, so have the crew matured alongside him, right? And again, we get more of that in the next episode, but in a very real way, the crew mirror Holland as they go through character development, and so it's right that they sort of have a reawakening at the same time that he does.
I do like the say that they basically have the same reaction that they did to Talho's transformation. Is like, oh god, about damn time, and then like they get out of their chairs and like, okay, sure, let's do it.
Yes, sometimes it's easier to see the problem when you're outside of it, right there. But yeah, and we end this episode on a triumphant note with the Gecko State setting off for the capital city, and Stoner develops his latest masterpiece. Hey, remember film?
I thought you were going to say, hey, remember Stoner?
No, I mean, like, he's been about
the whole time.
A beautiful portrait of Renton and Eureka, which I just have to point out either he was on a board next to them or they were floating about 3 feet off the ground.
He just has a
drone.
No, he just has a really strong lens or whatever.
Yeah.
It's got like 50x zoom or whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's an acknowledgement of the show. The show itself knows that this is a powerful image. Right?
Yes,
that it is the image that you want to linger with the audience for this episode, and just an outstanding episode all over. We've had a lot of those recently, but this is the one.
A nice little return to like the older style of episode where there may not be plot happening necessarily, but it is still an essential episode to understand the show and its characters, right?
Yeah, I think that this acts as a good counterbalance to the things we are about to learn in the next episode as well, which, now that we have cleared the deck of some of our existing baggage, it's time to add new baggage and complicate the plot in new, interesting ways there.
I heard that Holland knew Jesus Christ personally, man. Yeah. No, I wasn't tripping on drugs, man. I met him.
Holland is basically this universe's version of St. Paul. Basically. With that, let's move on to that next episode, episode 34, Inner Flight. So, Aqua, a much easier musical reference for you on this one, I think. Can you tell us about Inner Flight?
Right, we've already mentioned them, but this is the second reference, as far as I know, to Primal Scream and their seminal album, Screamadelica, from 1991?
I think it's 92. I'd have to
or 92, somewhere slightly older than I am.
But yes, I'm going to say as well that yes, just to clear it up, yes, you are correct. This is a Primal Scream track from the 1992 album Screamadelica. I'm going to say this is a deliberate callback, actually, because there are a lot of shared visuals and themes between this episode and Higher Than the Sun. Episode 10, which was the other episode named after a track off this album. So I think that this is a deliberate case of theme naming.
Interesting.
There. But it's also fitting because obviously, this is an episode which is told largely in flashback and flash sideways to a certain extent. Right. So
I don't remember much about like what specifically happens in Higher Than the Sun, aside from the fact that Holland screams "Higher than the sun."
I mean, that's the important thing, obviously.
Yeah.
But the most obvious thing that they do suborbital transits in both of them. That is the thank God for zero gravity scene.
Right.
But yeah, we kick off with some modern day stuff here. Namely, we see the other two sages who probably have names, but I've not bothered to learn them.
Who cares?
Exactly. They don't seem to be a big fan of what Dewey is doing. They're like, oh, actually, this is kind of fucked up. Maybe we shouldn't have given him
Are we the baddies?
This rabid dog or not even rabid dog, this fascist dog we unleashed is doing fascist things.
Yeah, it's less are we the baddies and more I didn't think leopards would eat my face.
Right.
Yes.
And then in the meantime, like the lady sage is like secretly smirking because, they fucked.
Well, I'm not going to go that far, but we know that the sages have been spying and working against each other there.
I mean, we know that because she literally said so in the last couple of
Yes,
episodes.
and also remember the Agaha squad took out that attendant who was a spy for one of the others. So intrigue continues in the world of the sages, although there's definitely also an element of, should we do something? We should do something about this.
Alas, unfortunately, there is nothing that can be done about the creeping rise of fascism in our society. Not even when you're literally an autocratic leader.
Yes, well, I mean, I think one of the things that this episode reveals is that autocracy is actually not quite as simple as it may appear. But I also want to point out here that Holland describes Norb as the legendary super powerful monk, which makes him sound like a Dragon Ball character.
It's so funny.
Well, I mean, it makes him sound like God. What's the guy's name? The like legendary like kung fu movie hero.
Oh, sure. Wong Fei Hung?
Wong Fei Hung, yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's almost like an unintentional punchline because he's describing him as this, as that, and then you watch this episode and he's not wrong.
No, and but just the I think in this episode we see a lot of Norb as yes, he is powerful, but he's also intensely spiritual, and he provokes a crisis of conscience in Holland. So just to have him described as the legendary, super powerful monk, that's a Dark Souls boss title.
Right.
It's just,
I joked, but it seriously has the vibes of Holland has embraced the cringe, and now he tells the kids about that one time he got high, and someone told him about Jesus, and was actually, Jesus was the original surfer, man. Yeah, you're onto something.
Oh man, has Tradcath Talho been sharing some literature with Holland? Are we about to get a couple of recent converts on our hands?
Tradcath Talho and Born Again Holland.
But no. Well, I mean, yeah, they basically set up that Norb, who is the high priest of the Votorek, who has been in hiding for the last few years.
And we have heard Norb's name mentioned a few times in throwaways here and there, but this is the first episode that kind of establishes who he really is and why he's important.
Very Dalai Lama coded character, this high priest of a religion who lives in exile. And who is also an important political figure.
Has incredible energy powers, just like the real Dalai Lama.
and again, that's why it's funny, right? Because before the reveal that he actually unironically has powers, you think, oh, he must be powerful because of his political influence, because he's a spiritual leader. That's why he's important, and not, because he actually has powers.
Not because he can shoot beams from his head.
Which is in a show like this, again, Eureka 7, real robot, super robot, who gives a fuck, whatever, it doesn't matter. But
generally a more grounded sort of sci-fi.
Yeah, you don't expect a character like Norb, also because there's nothing in the show to establish before this episode that the Votorat can just do this.
Yes, we do take a fairly hard turn into space magic here, and there are things to discuss about that. One thing that I do like at the beginning of this episode is Renton immediately going, "Is this another hidden camera prank?" It's a good joke, but it also shows that perhaps Renton has become a little more worldly as time has gone by. He's a little bit less gullible than when we began this adventure. I also just have written here, Moondoggy, hello darkness, my old friend.
Yes, emo Moondoggy.
Yes, we have a return of the Moondoggy inferiority complex plot, which we haven't seen for quite some time. But just
Moody Doggy.
Just the shot of him staring emptily into the distance. I really wanted to dub the Simon and Garfunkel song over.
But yeah, they basically just spell out.
No. You need to do the Disturbed version because it's Moondoggy.
Well, it's been a good run, everyone, but we're going to have to finish the show there.
I didn't even get to my bit, but no, in all seriousness, they basically just explained that Norb has basically turned himself in, right? That he is he has not been found and captured by the Federation. He is actively turning himself in because, as we find out, he wants a dialogue with Dewey specifically, right?
They mentioned that he has not been seen in 3 years. He's been in hiding, and the significance of the 3 years will become apparent shortly in this.
Also, I just have to I have to post this screen cap from this scene, this conversation. It's just one of those things of, it's not intentionally funny, but it's okay. I just put it in the Discord. It's just
I'll put it in the post.
The comically wide Kengo in this scene just gets me.
He's
also noticed this. He's basically square.
Yeah, he's 3 times wider than Talho.
I heard Kengo has an 8-pack.
It's so funny. I don't know why it just gets me.
He is as wide as Eureka is tall.
Yeah. Again, I don't think it's it's probably a little off model, but it's just
it's pretty Minecraft Kengo.
Yeah, so we kind of like, again, we've heard a bit about Norb through here, but we get some more concrete data here. Basically, Holland says we need Norb to get past the Great Wall. And past the Great Wall is question mark?
Question mark? Yeah.
The thing that,
land?
like...
Yeah.
You know, they also start bringing up this idea of a partner, right? That there is...
We'll get into that in a second there.
Right. But just this idea that... my point is that they need to get the Great Wall because whatever's behind that will be the key to achieving potentially coexistence with the Corellians, right?
Yes. They need to press the stop all war button, which is hidden behind the Great Wall.
Yes, exactly.
But first you need to be like the bestest lovers in order to get through there.
That's a fairly accurate summation of this episode, but so
we'll get there.
We do get Holland in unusually serious territory again here, just sitting down and basically explaining his own backstory to Renton. And, you know, there's some nice character touches here. I like the fact that Eureka says, "Oh, I'll tell him," and Holland is like, "No, this is my job. I should tell him." That's not something that we would see from the Holland of the beginning of the show there. But the bulk of this episode is a flashback back to an incident which we have already seen, which is the attack on Del Cielo that we saw.
Right.
I think this is structurally clever because we've seen this event from the perspective of Eureka, and we do get some of that stuff intercut with the Holland flashback here, but also we see it from the perspective of Holland this time, and obviously a lot of other stuff happened here. We do also see Holland meeting Eureka for the first time, where he notes that she was completely unemotional and did not react in any way. Did anybody notice something interesting about this scene of Holland meeting Eureka?
It is set in a bit of a strange location, I know.
It is.
Like, the same room that, like...
It's the room that Anemone is in, right?
Correct. Yeah. It's the room that we first saw Anemone in.
Yeah.
Again, there's the connection between those two, right? But yes, that is what I was getting at. It is the same place that we first saw Anemone as well. And, of course, Dewey is here as well there. But, we still see some really gnarly stuff in the Del Cielo massacre.
I mean, the bit where like they transform the robots and he just drives over a corpse.
Yes, that's the bit I was going to mention as well. It's just like where we see the corpse like boom, boom. I was like, man, I know you need to sell it, but seriously.
I mean, it really does a great job of selling, like, you know, this different, like, foreign era of Holland, right? Like, he is a different person, right? Like, the coldness, like, there's never even a hint of hesitation when they're carrying out this massacre, right? Yeah. It's just like...
There's a different kind of coldness to the sort of grumpy, distant Holland we've seen in the Gecko State. You know, it's a very angry young man energy to it.
Just business, you know, you guys are enemies of our vague concept of, you know, civilization and society. You're all terrorists, so you might as well be vermin, right?
There's a lot of spitting back lines which you suspect it will learn from a textbook wrote here. You know?
Right, like he is like, he's spitting propaganda, right? He's like, he says, "Oh, well, you know, you're the leader of the religion that worships the monsters that will destroy the world," right? Like stuff like that, right? You know, but
and that's interesting because it shows that. And again, you know, we have seen a bleak hint of this, but it shows that the military has known about the existence of the Corellians and the potential that they have for quite some time. Right?
Yes.
We
and
know
that it's like a public fact, even that it's like a part of the propaganda, because I'm assuming you can't, you know, manufacture consent for this level of like genocide without at least spreading the belief among the populace that Corellians are real and they're here to hurt you.
No, I don't think it's publicly known. Remember, Holland is meant to be a fairly high-ranking officer.
Right, he was special ops. Yeah.
But clearly he has been indoctrinated with this information. And remember, we know from previous stuff that he served alongside Adrock Thurston for a while. So clearly he is privy to at least some of the information that research project was looking into there. Anyway, the main thing, you know, sort of the inciting incident here is that we learn that the SOF had a secret mission
Yes.
Aside from putting down the resistance, they were also attempting to capture Norb. And Holland finds Norb at his temple, church, whatever you want to call it. It's very Tibetan. And tries to arrest him with his robot, and Norb just pulls the power out of his compact drive.
Yeah.
Which this dude's got powers.
Yeah, he's got like weird like live stream manipulation.
Yeah, he just has magic powers, which is fairly jarring, I'm going to say.
It's definitely like, I think it's the moment that sort of makes you like, it is a bit of a spit take moment, right? Because again, right, obviously there's a lot, there is mysticism, there is ambiguity to the nature of Eureka 7's world.
Yeah.
And as much as we joke, it is kind of wild that you just see a random unarmed dude like on foot just like wave his hands and deactivates Holland's mech, right?
Yeah. It's pretty comedic too, honestly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, at least there is some like sort of precedent, because we know that even though Eureka has not displayed like outright magical powers like this, we know that she has a sort of supernatural awareness, even maybe some kind of telepathic bond with the earth, with the scup coral. And what we learn about Norb at the end of this episode does already sort of provide a hint as to how he maybe acquired these powers, so it doesn't come immediately out of nowhere.
And to a certain extent, I think this is meant to be a deliberate escalation, right? We are meant to see Norb as a powerful and mysterious figure, and giving him literal magic powers certainly accomplishes that in a way. It is jarring, and you could argue that it's meant to be jarring. Regardless, Holland attempts to capture Norb, and Norb seems more interested in giving him sort of a lecture/sermon instead. Lots of interesting stuff revealed here. What do we think of some of the dialogue, some of the revelations that happen here?
I mean, it seems like Norb is sort of meant to set up as like the previous incarnation, not literally, but like the previous incarnation of this story, because he mentions a girl named Sakuya who was a Corellian, and I'm assuming she was like the previous Eureka, the previous human-like Corellian that the planet sent out into the world to learn about mankind, and that Norb was her chosen human, that he was the Renton, that he was the person teaching this girl about the world and becoming closer with her, but that something went wrong, and that is what led Norb to, become the spiritual leader that maybe of a religion that maybe even like preaches the coming of the second Corellian prophet girl in the form of Eureka, right?
Yeah, I think that's the most pertinent point here. Obviously, we never have that said out loud, although Dewey gets very close at the end. But yes, the implication seems to be that this has all happened before, which is kind of a huge thing to learn in this, and I think Norb is a little vague about the particulars of Sakuya. One line I really do like here is where he says she's cute, so does it matter if she's human or not? Which feels like a touch of postmodernism creeping in there. Perhaps maybe that one's targeted more at the audience than the than Holland here, but
extremely like Hideo Kojima coded line, like
paging Hideaki Anno. But yes, the implication seems to be that Norb knew of a previous human Corellian, for better or worse. He knows about Eureka, and he knows things about her that you wouldn't be able to know without first-hand access to her or experience of somebody who was very like her.
He knows what she is and what she will become. Like, he doesn't know her personally, but he knows her, like her trajectory and what she is set out to be, because he knows her true nature.
Just like Dr. Bear, he uses the blank sheet of paper comparison.
And
I think
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, that's a very telling sort of echo of dialogue there. We do find out a few other things as well. We find out that the reason Del Cielo is in ruins is because Norb destroyed it. He destroyed the towers using his ability to control the trapar, seemingly.
He used his earth bending to erase the evidence.
He can earthbend, he can airbend, he can do all sorts of things here.
I mean, if there's anything Avatar: The Last Airbender and One Punch Man have taught us, there's nothing more powerful than a bald guy.
Yes, it's true. There's some really good dialogue here. I particularly like when Norb describes Corellians. He says, Corellians are not monsters, they are the dreams that this land sees.
Yeah, that's a line that goes hard. Because I do occasionally complain about the translation that we are using, which is the official Funimation subs.
Yes.
Like, for example, when they talk about the partner, I don't know, I would have translated that differently. I would have made it maybe even gone with the chosen one or the chosen partner or something like that. It sounds a little bit weird, but they do know that when a line is supposed to be resonant and iconic, to put to use an overused word, and they do make those lines memorable. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few strong bits of dialogue here. There's the blank sheet of paper stuff again. There is the smile is the sign of change, which I really like as well. Although it's telling us something we already knew. Like when Eureka smiled was the moment that Holland decided to take Renton on board. But I think this is a pretty good portrayal within the bounds of the available fiction, of course, of somebody. Of Norb sort of assaulting Holland's worldview, so to speak. Yeah. He does a pretty good job of breaking down Holland in sort of a, not necessarily a gentle way, he's quite forceful at sometimes, but of sowing doubt in his mind.
Right, because there's a strong indication that Norb is what Holland will become, right? Because he is also he mentions that he was also rejected as the chosen partner for, in his case, Sakuya, just like how Holland will not become the chosen partner for Eureka. And he's sort of predicting Holland's role in this story, right? You will not be the chosen one, but you will be, the match that lights the keg or something like that.
Yeah, I think... I think a lot of the stuff it's interesting that they kind of use this flashback to kind of basically communicate that this is the inciting moment of the entire plot, basically, right? Like what Norb is seeding in Holland here is, this goes all the way, this goes all the way back to the moments we see in episode 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is sort of. It is the moment that Holland deviated from the path that he thought was laid out before him, right?
And I find it interesting how this sort of averted my expectations, because Adrock has nothing to do with it. Because you're led to believe that, Holland knew Adrock, so it was Adrock who converted Holland to the side of the angels, who made him take care of Eureka, who made him see things his way and go from fighting for the Federation who want to eradicate the Scub Coral to fighting on the side of the Scub Coral. But it's not. It's kind of a more interesting thing almost where it was Holland's own decision, then of course being spurred on by Norb, but it still gives him that agency, while still respecting the ties he had to Adrock.
Yes, and I think one of the sort of secret truths of this show is that Adrock is not actually as important a character as he first appears to be. Not only is he a fake ultimate hero in universe, but he's kind of only important as sort of a catalyst.
He is a prophet, he is the John the Baptist. He is maybe we should do this. And everyone is yeah, sure, man. And now it turns out that he is right. Right.
And, I mean, we were joking a lot about Norb being Coral Jesus and all this sort of stuff, but there is very strong messianic imagery and language throughout this episode.
I mean, the whole, especially in the part where he sort of goes to Dewey, as in almost because Dewey wants to have him killed, right?
Well,
that's
eventually,
right. And this is like the most like Jesus coded thing of like, stepping up to the man who wants you killed and like embracing, acknowledging your incoming death in solemn, wisdom, and trying to, do or speak to this person's good character, even though you know that he has none.
Yes, and I think the messianic imagery also extends to Eureka, right? Norb is very effusive that she is the one who will save this world. In that sense, he is perhaps more of a John the Baptist figure. He is the one who comes to lead the way almost. And obviously, we are making Christian comparisons. That perhaps was not the intent of the writers, but applicability. The point is that there is a very powerful sense of sort of like religious fate around.
Right. And like we've compared Norb to the Dalai Lama, who has of course not similar would maybe be a hard word, but also is a kind of messianic figure, a spiritual leader or a kind of vanguard of the incoming, spiritual revolution.
Yeah. And, I think we have spoken in the past about how a lot of the animism and the sort of respect for nature stuff ties into Shintoism and Buddhism and stuff like that. But also the idea of recurrence, right? The idea of cycles, the idea that this has happened before and, and it will happen again and things can be changed if the right things happen this time. That is a very that's a very Buddhist belief,
We are all burdened with samsara.
Yes, exactly. But this idea that fate has conspired for things to come around again is another part of the religious imagery surrounding.
That makes the flashback, quote unquote flashback, we get at the start of the first episode of these two very interesting, right? Because you get this idea of like, this has happened before. Like maybe the exact same thing happened on old Earth, maybe to like make the environmental subtext text, maybe we ruined old Earth as well. And now we're going to do the same thing with this new planet that we were able to have as our home for 10,000 years.
Certainly the subtext is there, I think one more thing that I want to say about this flashback sequence, there's a couple more things, I do think that it's wise that the show does not show Holland immediately sort of turning on a dime and accepting what you're saying, it plants the seed of an idea in him, but we don't see him sort of come to Jesus immediately.
Right. Knowing Holland, he had to spend at least like 2 months whining and moping about it and having like infinite conversations with Talho about it. Yes. And Talho could like sigh and roll her eyes and be like, sure, dude, you figure yourself out and I'll be here when you need me.
Right. But it is, I think that's smart, What we see is the beginning of a process of doubt, and they leave it to our imagination to fill in the rest of the details there. We also see a little bit more of Eureka finding the children. Then
immediately taking them to Holland in the nerve ash, which I found very funny.
I mean, he's her commanding officer.
Yeah.
I like the detail here that even as like a tiny tot, Maurice still tries to attack her, and that one's got fight in him.
But he's pacified by the power of hug. Yes. Thank God for zero gravity.
Thank God for zero gravity, etc. Yes,
there's always been a little bit. It's not explored much, but there has always been a little bit of the subtext that Maurice is the one who is like was just old enough to like have like more cognizant memories, right?
And I mean, there has been sort of a very peripheral but sort of continuing running theme that Maurice is sort of approaching the age where he is able to be his own agent, right? Where he has his own thoughts, his own feelings, that kind of thing, And without spoiling anything, I will say that plot sort of will continue as we go forward. Maurice will continue to be explored a little bit, let's say there. But let's return to the present day for a bit here. we have to move on to sort of moving away from our religious fable. We have to move to the more practical aspects of Norb's in the capital. How are we going to get Norb? And the answer appears to be we will assault the capital head on.
Are we bad enough dudes to rescue the Dalai Lama?
Yes. And the answer is yes, because we're the main characters, of course, there. And we see the beginning of, without a doubt, the most important arc in the entire show. The Moondoggy redemption arc begins here.
It turns out that Moondoggy has his license now. He was actually a pilot all along. He was not useless. It was just a ruse.
Yes.
He was merely the second best pilot in Gecko State.
Moondoggy's pilot license also shows he is 1 day older than I am.
All right. Moondoggy senpai.
But yes, Moondoggy. No, it's Doggy Nissan.
Right.
So Moondoggy decides, because Talho has to go with the away team, for want of a better word, because only she knows the identity of their contact inside the capital there. So they need another pilot, and even though you'd think that like Hap or Kengo or somebody could pilot, it turns out that Doggy wants to step up and becomes the Gecko's pilot. And we do get some nice little support here, especially from Mathieu, who you would not expect to have Doggy's back in this sort of case.
I mean, bro understands what it's like to be a useless piece of shit and step up to the plate. So.
Right, but they are completely different types of useless pieces of shit there. Doggy is unintentionally useless, whereas Mathieu is very intentionally useless.
Yes, Mathieu knows. Mathieu is the employee here who like knows that he has the potential to step up to more responsibilities, and that sounds like a huge pain in the ass. So he's fine being just the mech pilot.
Yeah, man, you achieve self-actualization. You do that, man. You get that promotion, so I don't have to get it.
Yes, he just wants to pilot the mech and, ride sick waves.
Yeah, and orbit around Hilda.
Yes, whereas Moondoggy is, at least up till this point, actually unironically useless.
But yes.
No, he is there to motivate Gidget to do her job.
Sure, yes, you know what? That's true.
We also get a scene with Dewey and Norb, where Norb has, as was alluded to earlier, turned himself in willingly and been taken to Dewey. And we get some, a little bit of verbal banter here, but I think the most important revelation from this scene is we find out that Dewey wanted to contact the collective consciousness of the Scub Coral before, and Norb would not let him. And therefore, Dewey does the whole, well, actually, this is your fault because you wouldn't pick up the phone to the Coral for me.
Right. And it sort of implies that Dewey is also a failed chosen one, that he also could not negotiate.
Or at least there is a strong subtext to Dewey's character that, I mean, we've already established that Dewey has already, enjoys, framing himself as a messianic figure, right? And, with delusions of grandeur, right? And I think it feels perfectly in line that much of Dewey's actual real motivation is probably...
He's an incel. He was rejected by the Scub Coral, and now it must die.
Unironically, it is a petty grievance at the end of the day, right? The Scub Coral could have been a mother to me. He desired being that person, right? And I think because what you can pick up on here is that Dewey wanted that because for selfish reasons, right? He wanted to contact the Scub Coral to become a messianic figure, right? To become, the leader of the New World Order, and that's why Norb rejected, the premise.
The thing I'm going to say is I don't think Dewey attempted to become a chosen one of the Coral. He wanted to be put in touch with the Coral so he could kill it.
Right.
He wanted
or at least
to
dominate it or tell it what to do.
Or harness its power,
control
or
whatever.
But as G said, he wanted to be the leader of a new world order. It was purely a selfish desire on his regard, and so Norb obviously realized that and would not put him in touch with the coral, and so
now he has forced Dewey's hand. Now Dewey will have to become Space Hitler because they wouldn't let him become Space Hitler.
Yes.
Basically.
Dewey doing the classic, well, why would you make me hit you like this?
Look what you made me do.
Yes, exactly, basically. And Norb is pretty chill about it. So to convince Norb that he is not a crazy supervillain, Dewey takes him to his garden full of replicas of old world Earth buildings, which is definitely not something you would have if you were a crazy supervillain.
Yeah. Well, before we get there, we do have the other probably big reveal.
I was going to save that for the very end, actually.
Okay, sure. Well, there's two big reveals at the end of this episode. One important, the other kind of wacky, but
I was going to save the wacky one for the end. Let's stay on Dewey and Norb for the moment here. So Dewey has a garden with like tiny replicas of the pyramid and the Sphinx, the Eiffel Tower, and of course Norb stops to look at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government building because
all the
most important landmark in
the Tokyo Metropolitan Government building, definitely on the level of the pyramids. But yes, and this is where we find out why Norb has sick coral-based superpowers.
Nanomachines, son.
Yeah, because
this is the wacky reveal. Wait, when I implied wacky reveal, I meant this one.
Oh no, this one's not wacky. The other one's wacky.
What? Dude has a fucking compact drive embedded in his sternum.
Yeah, that's not wacky.
That happened to a buddy of mine just last week.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
my buddy Greg.
Oh man.
No, this is not the wacky one for sure.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Talho being pregnant is the wacky one.
Yeah.
Drathcat arc complete.
Yes, exactly. They're the perfect nuclear family.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty. Yes, I mean, I think it's like what this is. They basically say. Obviously we're not told why Norb has a compact drive embedded in his chest, but I think Dewey says this is a man who has failed to become a partner.
Right. Yes. I mean, we can imply some fairly obvious things from that, right? Like, it is clearly, as we said, something went wrong with his attempts to become the partner of a Corallian, and perhaps this is the grisly fallout of it. But let's get on to talking about Talho being pregnant. What?
See, the wackiest thing about this is that this implied that Talho and Holland had sex during like Holland's shitty mopey asshole period.
I mean, I regret to inform you, Holland's shitty mopey asshole period is in fact his entire life. So
yeah.
And the joke was always that she made him sleep on the couch.
Yes. This is just kind of out of nowhere, and I'd completely forgotten this because, spoilers, it doesn't really play any factor into anything that happens from here on in.
Oh, really? Okay, I definitely remember this just because... Because I had a similar reaction to Aqua of like, I mean, obviously the implication is they're sleeping together, but I was like, I didn't know. Well, you know what? I take it back. Holland does not seem like a guy who would use protection. I take that back.
Holland seems highly irresponsible. Let's say.
You know what? Yes.
Maybe this is a society that has invented the space elevator, but not the birth control pill. Who can say?
I mean, there is of course like a bunch of like weird old Japanese dudes, right? Women things in here. It was like, Talho decided to get her shit together because she's going to be a mom, and that's what she uses to get Holland to.
Wait, what is that? It's the ghost of Shinzo Abe with a steel chair.
My God, it's Shinzo Abe's music. I mean, it's funny, right? Because obviously, it's the timing of it, right? Is like, she suddenly, it's like, she just knows she's pregnant now, right? Like, it's just, out of nowhere,
it is,
right?
Like, it is almost comedic, to be honest.
Yes.
And
so they don't have birth control, but they do have, like,
steel chairs,
pregnancy tests and steel chairs, yes.
Yeah, also, I guess the implication that there were pregnancy tests aboard the Geckos, I mean, I guess there's a decent number of adult couples.
There's quite a few couples.
Yes, we know Gidget and Moondoggy are fucking all the time, so...
Still, the idea that, gotta go to the
little shop,
convenience store, and, you look at the bottom shelf in the corner is sex health related products.
It's just so out of I don't know. This is definitely the wacky reveal, I get it. It's meant to emphasize that, now we have, Holland now has a reason to live. He must come back alive for their baby. But thematically, the show has been placing such an emphasis on found family, right, and found relationships, and Gecko State as a family that chose to be together. It just seems it's a weird bit of old-fashioned cliche storytelling that sort of storms in from out of nowhere there.
It's a really good thing that Ray and Charles are dead, because boy, if those two found out about this, I mean, they'd be taking this plane down, no survivors.
I'm so mad. I'm going to go off and kill Eureka even more.
But, well, hey, I guess mechanically what this tells you is that Talho has equipped the ultimate final form of plot armor. She's a pregnant woman now, so...
Yeah.
I mean, it is simultaneously a plot armor for Talho and a death flag for Holland.
Well, yes.
Yes, okay,
that is absolutely correct.
You are, in fact, completely correct in that regard. I mean,
next episode, Holland dies in magma.
Holland has been setting up his death. I mean, Joe. Obviously, hey, these 2 episodes, great, wonderful, emotional. We get to see sides of these characters we've never seen up till now. But also, these 2 episodes are just Holland raising death flag after death flag.
I mean, this final scene is basically the scene in Team America where he goes, "I will never die," and then,
no one has ever Obi-Wan'd this much since the original Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for various death threats coming Holland's way. This was a really fun, exceptional pair of episodes, I think. I think Pacific State is the standout of the 2, but we get so much cool world building and backstory in a flight as well as some choral magic. I just think this was, I know we say this all the time now, but just a really strong pair of episodes there.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts before we do our wrap-up here?
To quote the gold standard for redemption arcs in animated shows, congratulations on Holland for winning the not as bad as a guy as he could have been award.
Indeed. Yes. Well, there's still time. There's still plenty of time there. And with that, we have come to the end of another exciting installment of Blue Mondays. We'll be back in a couple of weeks there. In the meantime, leave us a like, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. Please enlighten us as to your theories about coffee shop AUs and
oh god,
is nuclear Catholic family AU a thing?
Almost certainly.
Almost certainly, yes.
Okay, well, I better get working on that then.
Anyway, let us know how many seconds Holland still has left to live in the comments.
Yes. In the meantime, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, all of that good stuff there. And we will be back very soon. Thank you very much, Aqua.
You're welcome.
Thank you, G.
Glad to be back.
Glad to have you back. And thank you to everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.